Welcome back to the original church. I call this episode, Why Christianity is Like Kung Fu. I've studied martial arts all my life, and if I'm counting right, it's been something like 8 different kinds of martial arts, including 2 different styles of Kung Fu. And I've also read the Bible and studied Christianity and the church all my life. But it was only recently, while teaching a class, that those 2 things finally merged in my head. And I was just sort of going off the top of my head, and this is what came out as I was speaking to my students. I said this. I said, when I go into the Kung Fu school to train, there are pictures on the wall. And my Sifu, that's the Kung Fu teacher, he can point to those pictures and say, that was my teacher, and that was his teacher, and that was his teacher, and that was his teacher. And eventually it gets far enough back so they're not photographs anymore. They're photographs of paintings or even line drawings. But the point is, he can keep going back. And that was his teacher. And that was his teacher. All the way back to the founder of that particular style of Kung Fu. And you see, within the Kung Fu system, it's important to preserve the style of Kung Fu as the founder handed it down. Not just out of some conservative desire to enshrine tradition, but because to fail to do so is to endanger the students. Because if you teach the wrong moves, or even if you teach the right moves incorrectly, the moves won't really work and somebody's going to get hurt. In the same way, it's important to preserve the correct teachings of Christianity. As the saying goes, not to preserve dead ashes, but to keep the fire alive. There are things that are essential to Christianity. That is, if they were changed or left behind, it wouldn't be Christianity anymore. And these essentials of the faith, we call this orthodoxy. Now, that's just a compound Greek word, orthodoxy. Literally, it means correct praise, but we use it to refer to the correct teaching within the Christian church. And the point is to move away from the correct teaching, to move away from orthodoxy so that the church ceases to be the church. Well, then the gates of hell would prevail against it, wouldn't they? But more than that, and I get this question a lot in my classes, why couldn't the original church just let everyone believe whatever they wanted to? And the answer to that is because souls were at stake. It has always been believed that what you believe has a direct impact on your salvation. And so to teach the wrong things was to lead people astray and lead them away from salvation. So, for example, you could teach that Jesus was a space alien from another planet who just happened to have advanced technology that seemed miraculous to the people 2,000 years ago. You could teach that, but it wouldn't be correct. Why not? Because it wouldn't be consistent with his teaching and the teaching of the people who knew him personally. You see, in the original church, the way you preserve the teaching of the church and avoid corrupting it is by protecting and preserving what was originally taught, by handing it down faithfully from teacher to student. And then those students become teachers and hand it down to their students. We have a theological word for this, or a phrase. It's called apostolic succession. Now, the concept of apostolic succession is a little bit bigger than this, and we'll talk about that in another video. But for now, think of apostolic succession as the succession of teachers. Each teacher's students then replace them and become the new teachers down through the generations. And the original Christians believed that they could trust what was being taught in their churches because their teachers learned it from the previous teachers, who learned it from the previous teachers, going all the way back to the apostles and through them to Jesus himself. So, just as it would be physically dangerous for a bunch of beginners to start a Kung Fu school with no teacher and then just try to figure it out as they went along and teach others as they did that, well, that's how spiritually dangerous it would be for anyone to call themselves a follower of Christ without a direct teacher. let alone call themselves a pastor or open up a church, without being commissioned by those who came before them. Remember, in the introductory video, I said that it's all about interpretation. Every expression of any religion is an interpretation of what the founder or founders taught. So how did the original Christians know that their interpretation was correct? Well, just like Kung Fu, because it was handed down from master to disciple, from teacher to student. There's a principle at work here, and it's this: you cannot have anything that you have not received, and you certainly cannot give anything that you haven't first received. The letter of Jude in the New Testament calls our faith the faith that was once for all handed down to the saints. You know, there are some religions that say that you can find truth within yourself. Through contemplation or meditation or through some other means, you will find a truth that is buried within yourself, and all you need to do is bring it out. But this is not what the original church taught, and it's not what the original Christians believed. Truth is not naturally within you. It comes from outside of you, and it has to be revealed to you. It comes to you through revelation. Now, the primary way that God reveals truth to humanity is, wait for it, the incarnation, the coming of Jesus Christ himself to live as a human being. Then, through Scripture, God has revealed himself as well. And of course, chronologically, the Old Testament came before the coming of Jesus. But you get the idea. And then eventually, God has revealed truth to us in the writings of the apostles that come to be our New Testament. But right away, there are disagreements over the meaning of the words in the New Testament, which proves this, that Scripture does not interpret itself. Peter wrote this: "There is no prophecy of Scripture that is a matter of personal interpretation." Now, we're going to have another video later on how the original Christians read Scripture, so we'll get to that. But for now, here's the point. We all need to learn to receive the correct interpretation. It doesn't come from within us. We need to receive it from those who learned it before us. And this is why Christianity is like Kung Fu. This is apostolic succession. And this is how truth was discerned by the original Christians even before there was a New Testament. All of this is based on the ancient model of apprenticeship. Jesus called disciples, they became his apprentices. He commissioned them as apostles, and that word apostle means someone who is sent out. Those apostles, in turn, chose their own disciples and commissioned them. The original Christians did not believe that just because a person has some general sense that they are a follower of Christ, that this makes them a Christian, especially if following Christ is reduced to simply agreeing with the most obvious parts of his message, like love your neighbor. Being a Christian meant many things to them, but it had everything to do with a whole lifestyle. Now, for those who were converted to Christianity from paganism, that meant a completely different life. You see, in the original church, you had to do more than just believe something. You had to become something. You had to become a disciple. You had to become an apprentice of those who were Christians before you. In the original church, if you wanted to join the church, it wasn't that easy. They made you take classes. Depending on the time and place, that could take up to 3 years. And then you got baptized. And then baptism was really only the beginning of your training. The Apostle Paul compares the Christian life to a marathon and to boxing. And he talks about the Christian life as continual training. He told Timothy to train yourself for devotion. This training, first it's learning, but then it's also discipline. So training in the Christian life is like training in Kung Fu. Kung Fu has blocks, punches, and kicks. Christianity has prayer, fasting, and almsgiving. And we'll have a video on those things later as well. But mostly the original Christians saw their role as one of lifelong learning, growing in holiness and in devotion. And that is like Kung Fu for the soul. And that's how Christianity is like Kung Fu, and that's how it was in the original church. Cheers. Hey, thanks for watching this video all the way to the end. I really appreciate that. Please share this video with your friends, and please join me in the original church community on locals.com. Don't forget that if you join the original church community on locals.com, you can join me each week for a live, in-depth, chronological Bible study. It's live streamed every Saturday, but you can watch it later if you're not available. So join me for that, and I'll see you there. I hope to see you there. I hope to see you there, and I'll see you there.